Hi, Cyndi.
Hello, Kate.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. I am only on my second cup of coffee. So
We're gonna caffeine. We're gonna caffeine it up
way more
live.
coffee. Yeah,
Live.
for sure.
So this is the amazing Cyndi Doyle, and that is her real true name because it's
Oh,
always prefaced by the amazing. And so TACD, the amazing Cyndi Doyle. And you are watching, hopefully, in the Step It Up group, which is our membership for those of you in the Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses, or maybe you've taken a Kate Walker training course, or who knows how you found this, but you just want a little bit more. And so that's what this is. And so Cyndi and I are going to talk a little bit more about how to add to your practice, because Cyndi, what I tell people is, you seeing clients can only go so far. You're going to run out of steam. You won't have that influence. And then, of course, we're going to plug the free workshops at the end and throughout this so that folks know. So if you're watching this on a replay, thank you very much. But you're going to hear about something coming up in June. So if it already happened, hopefully you were there. So Cyndi, talk a little bit about, so the first thing, we'll talk about your practice, talk about you, what have you added to your practice? And because it's just so much. And hold on. So this just made me think of something. See, I've had a lot of caffeine. This is not about getting busier. I want to put that right there. This isn't about being busy. All right. This is about being productive. All right. So Cyndi, tell us what all you have added to your practice.
So I have a group practice in Denton, and I realized that as I was, working with clients one-on-one, that I wanted to make a different impact as well. That was really my original motivation, was impacting more people. And how can I impact more people? So I think I did make the mistake initially of becoming more busy rather than thinking about it strategically and kind of thinking about, okay, it's trading that time for money kind of a situation, right? So to answer your question, what I've added is I have added a lot of things that help me market, which have then added a lot of opportunities for me to increase my, not only my reach, but my income for sure. So my podcast leads to connecting with other people. So my podcast is Code for Couples. I specifically wanted to build out a niche or niche wherever you are, working with law enforcement. And initially I was really scared, like, oh, I just got to do first responders. And then I started thinking about how many law enforcement officers there are, or corrections officers. So it's like, there's plenty. So doing the podcast was my first step, really got me out there. And so what I've added is I have a book. And yes, that takes time. You add work when you do this. However, I will share with your audience that this month has been my highest book sales. And I also don't mind sharing, like, some people are like, oh, you just make $2 a book. I make like $5.40 a book, and I don't do squat. I publicize it. I promote it. I'm on other podcasts. I was telling you, Kate, that I was on a podcast, got interviewed for a podcast this morning. And so I'm talking about law enforcement mental health and relationships a lot. I always say emotional and relational wellness is what I talk about. Of course, I'm also like hitting a wave too when it comes to law enforcement mental health. I think of like Mike Michalowicz talks about Surge. There's a book Surge, and like, jumping on that wave. So that's helped a whole lot. And it's just something that runs in the background, and it gives me, as Kate once told me, it's the best business card you can ever have. She's the one who was like, you really need to write a book. You really need to write a book. And then other people were like, you're going to write a book, Cyndi. I'm like, I'm going to write a book. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, like, for me, it was nervous and scary to kind of like, it was that next level of like, shit, I'm putting this in writing and people are going to be like critical of it. And I've never had anybody be that critical of my book. Let me tell you.
It's so vulnerable, isn't it?
It is. I'm just like, I'm going to puke. And then you're like, oh no, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's like publishing that blog for the first time. And you're like, oh God, it's on the interwebs. And I was all ready for like the criticism and everything to come. And it was like crickets.
Like nobody could find it. Like,
no.
Where is it? Okay.
So speaking is really something that that's really where I've added a lot. And not just in my law enforcement niche, but also in my mental health niche. People see what I'm doing and they're very interested and curious about me stepping outside of my comfort zone. And how did you get outside of the comfort zone? And so I have several workshops there that I do. One of them is around ethically stepping out of your comfort zone and how you have to take care of yourself. But stepping outside my comfort zone, people are always very interested in like, how did you do that? What gave you the courage? And so, being a Brene Brown facilitator, I have a lot of that knowledge too. And that was part of what I did. I used to offer workshops. I don't do that anymore.
Well, not yet. I mean, this is not the Brene Brown, but right. I think a lot of people wonder how, like, it's always interesting to do these interviews, right? Like I've interviewed so many people and it's always like, yes, I was here. And then the next day I was here. And it's like, well, what is that? What is that bridge? What is that? I mean, and that's pretty fascinating stuff too, because you got to process.
Yeah, that's what I love talking about. Let me finish the original question because we will go all over the place. So the other things, how else I've done outside the therapy room, speaking, a lot of speaking. I put value on what I do as a speaker. And I do not do things for free as far as speaking. And even recently I had a request in Washington State. And they were like, oh, wow, this is a little bit more. And so I negotiated with them a little bit, but they're also meeting me a lot of it. So, just those kinds of things. I talked about having a train the trainer curriculum before I ever wrote the curriculum. That's really important. That's something that Miranda Palmer actually taught me from Cyndi. She's like, Cyndi, you don't write it unless somebody's going to pay you for it. And so I would talk a lot about, and I have the train the trainer curriculum. And I had a police department that said, wait, you have a train the trainer curriculum? I'm like, yes, I do. Let me tell you about it. And I was telling him, I had it in my head, right? And it was it's all based upon this stuff, but I had it outlined in my head. And they said, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Can you send us an outline? I'm like, yep, got on the computer, wrote an outline, sold my train the trainer curriculum. And now I have other PDs because now it's produced. Now somebody paid me to do it. So now it's there. And it's 14 modules, 14 hours worth of training that a police department can get trained to do and initiate within their department or their community or however they want to use it. But now I have other departments because this one department is very big, they've been letting other people know. And I have departments writing grants so they can pay for my training. So, and I don't mind telling you because we are like your group. I want to be honest with your group. So like my training program, just the curriculum is $4,500. And then they have to pay for me to come in and train. I have a upper version of this. Like if I get the demand, then I'm going to have trainers that are going to be able to train for it. So those are kind of some of the things that I've added. It definitely started with stepping out of my comfort zone and doing a podcast and talking. Speaking was my first step to having something paid outside the therapy room, and kind of grew from there. I don't mean to just shrug my shoulders. It's a lot of work. But the idea, I was seeing 32 clients a week in my office, and I'm now down to like around 17 to 20 is what I see in my office, because my income and I have a VA that works for me. So I have income, outgoing help, and it's grown in a way where, it works because
Well,
I have help. I can make money in my zone of genius,
so I almost want to skip the second question, which is why did you add, right? I mean, well, no, I'm going to ask it. So why add? What was your why?
My why was because I wanted to impact more people. I felt like I had a message and other messages to share. And that was really, it still is my why. Like when I get down to it, my why is because I want to throw not just a pebble into the ocean. I want to throw a freaking giant, I don't know, glacier sized boulder in the ocean and make those ripples to change things that are going on. I mean, we all know, for me, especially personally, because my husband now retired in law enforcement, but I know the impact of mental and relational wellness for the law enforcement community, because that bleeds over into how people interact with them and how they interact with the public, right? So that's a big part of it. So for me, it's making the impact. When I go and talk to mental health professionals, or as I'm growing out my mental health community and sharing what I know and my experiences with them, I want them to go and throw giant boulders into the water. I want to help them make the ripples. I think everybody has a story. I think everybody connects with other people. I think we're all relational and people connect with people. And so if it's something that you're willing to get outside of your comfort zone and do, that's like, I want to give you like injections of what I've experienced to be able to go and do the thing, right? Go do your thing. So that's really my motivation.
So what would you tell someone who wants to get started? And we'll cover this more in upcoming workshops and things like that. But what would you, because it sounds really, really hard. Like if I was talking to 10 years ago, Kate, she was still just like, I don't know if I can stand up and give my 1-minute elevator speech at the Chamber of Commerce meeting. Like so what would you tell that person who's got all these big dreams, or I'm going to give it a part B, if they think they're going to immediately like make a ton of money from it? You knew what I was going to say. Yeah.
Like it's work. And it really wasn't that long ago for me. Like 2016 is when, that's when I decided I have to do something. I can't just stay in my office and hide, because that's what I was doing. I mean, seriously, I hid in my office. It's way easier to stay in that little comfort zone of my 4 boxes where nobody really knows what you're doing. I mean, there is that element, right? Where it's like, people are like, oh, I know you're a great therapist. I was like, you've got no idea what I'm doing behind that door. I mean, I am a good counselor based upon my clients, but, but it was way easier for me to stay in my comfort zone. And part of just what I was conditioned to do too as a kid was like, don't make waves, stay under the radar, don't get attention, for many, many different reasons. So a lot of it was going against what came naturally to me, but that motivation, like, okay, well, it's that pivot point, right? When we're doing therapy, it's that pivot point for those clients that come in. It's like, this pain is greater than the pain of change. And that's where you have to hit that, because this is not easy. It is not easy moving into something that's uncomfortable, right? So the first, I have a couple of different thoughts on this, one of them being purpose. Like you have to have a purpose, and you have to have that motivation. And that's a big part of it. You have to be willing to go into the uncomfortable, for sure. I kind of have 2 different models in my head right now, because I have 2 different, I've like like an intro way to approach it, which I'm going to talk about that if that's okay. And then
Absolutely.
there's like so we'll talk about the intro way, and then we'll talk about the secondary way, which is like moving through all the uncomfortable. So the first part is you have to be clear on who you're working with, right? Who are these people that you're wanting to connect with, target? What are their pain points? What is it that they want and need? And I made huge mistakes there, because I thought my law enforcement community wanted to have better sex. Why not? Right. So like, oh, let's have greater intimacy. And by intimacy, I meant connection and sex and things like that. My audience does not connect with the word intimacy. They're like, intimacy. We just need to communicate better. So my language was off. I didn't know what I was doing. So being clear on who your niche is and
Mhm.
how you want to impact them. What is it that you see their pain points? Narrowing that down is a big part of that as well, you know?
Mhm.
Um, the second part of that is, I would say researching and, what is it that they want and need? You may have an idea of that. I always think of our niche as being some younger version of ourselves. Normally it
Oh.
is. So when I work with people to develop like their ideal client,
Mhm.
uh, narrative or whatever they're going to put out there for their marketing message. And I'll break it down and I'll break it down and I'll work with them to break it down. And all of a sudden they have this aha moment and they're like, shit, this is me 5 years ago. And I'm like, go figure. Really? Huh. Yes. It's all
Mhm.
some younger version of ourselves that we were in pain. We were struggling.
Yeah.
And now we've like had our epiphanies and our ahas, and we don't want people to have that same struggle. And
Mhm.
so I'm going to share it with the world, right? Because it gives purpose to our pain. Like that's
Mhm.
resiliency in its greatest, right? Is like purpose to your pain. Um, so niche messaging,
Mhm.
being clear on your messaging is really important. I think that one thing that I did not do initially was be very clear with my messaging and have those 3 to 5 messages that I repeat over and over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times in an interview with law enforcement people, I say, officers are trained to react and not respond. Like that is one of my messages. What keeps you safe on the job spills over at home and impacts it negatively. Like those are I have my messages and I know what they are.
Wow.
And so by having this messaging, I have my key points every single time. Now I can unpack those in many, many, many different ways.
Mhm.
And so even today, this morning, I was talking on a podcast for law enforcement, and he wanted to focus on affairs in law enforcement and how that impacts cultures. What did I use? Well, unfortunately, officers are trained to react. They want those hits. They want that oxytocin, serotonin hit because of what's in their brain. What? Tell me more about that. And there I go, right down the path. And I start talking about, so I have my speaking points all the time. I repeat the same speaking points like in every single thing that I do. It's just that I do it from different angles,
Well, and so
right?
let's hold a second because I want to make it really clear for our audience.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just like a marketing trick or some kind of a shtick or a
Mm-mm.
spiel. This is
A shtick.
literally from your research. I mean, this is why
Yes.
research comes before messaging, right?
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. And so that's why you have to like research what's going on. So that was part of it, right? So, and that's one of my uh, elements that I think of too,
Mhm.
that are
Absolutely.
essential, that the research is, I always say like, I'm a nerd because it's not just about reading books. It's about, we had to go look at those stupid research journals when we were in school, right? I hated that.
Yes.
Hated those. Read these research articles. Bleh. Or, if you're going for your PhD, you're doing this research and
Mhm.
we can be a conduit for that research.
Can I get an
Bringing
amen?
bringing that research into the public but it gives you insight into what's really happening and going on. It gives you legitimacy because now you're saying, and I'm backing this up. It's not just something I'm pulling out of my butt. It's something that I'm like saying, hey, this is backed up by this person here or this group here. And doing your own research then helps you to understand what's going on with your niche, your population. Now, some of that we already have, some of that we've been trained by research, right? So one of my areas is working with couples. So I had gone through 5 different trainings from John Gottman. Like most of them were from the Gottmans that I went to. And so I had all the research and all the information. So that was a part of the way I had research, but I was missing the research on my specific niche. And so going in, one of my favorite articles I pulled out in 2019. Yeah, 2019. And there's a statement in there about compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction. I have built a whole training around that statement because that statement was my inspiration. There was a research article that I read about spillover. I didn't have the word. And in finding that word, I'm like, holy cow. And then when I researched all of that, then here's all this backup for the thing that I'm experiencing personally as a spouse. But now I can say, and here's what the research shows. The research shows that officers that have a stronger home life are safer on the job. I can take that and go share that with the police department, and they'll go, well, holy crap, get in here and teach us relational wellness then, right? So these research points help us to sell ourselves. It's not just a marketing gig. What'd you say? Spiel. I learned what schmick, I think it was schmick was. It's a Australian word. It's
I didn't know that.
Slick and smooth combination. I learned that this week.
I will use that.
Schmick. So no, it's not just something that's made up. It is actually something that is helpful when you're serving your clientele. If I can't connect, right? If I don't really know what's going on, then I don't have that connection. So not only it provides me connection, it provides me a resource for material, it provides me speaking points. It's a way of deeper understanding. Of course, the other part of research too is to talk, like poll your audience, right? Talk to the audience yourself, but people don't do that. Like if you're putting something on Instagram stories and say, hey, would you prefer this or this? Do you like this title or this title? You can tailor what they want and need, which then gets you Googleable. Is that a verb?
Yes, it is. It is now.
So there's that aspect.
Well, and so I want to talk to the folks who are, if you're watching this and you're kind of in that pre-contemplative stage or the contemplative stage, right? You're thinking about. And I hope you hear that this is not something, you're not going to give somebody something they already know, right? You're the professional. And I think as professionals, we think, well, everybody already knows that. They already know about stress. They already understand the difference between action and reaction. And you're saying, no, you're the conduit. When you have the blog or the podcast or the speaking gig, you're the conduit for this information to them in a way that they're going, oh my gosh, finally, a way that we can use this. And there goes your impact, right? That glacier.
Right. And then you're throwing out the giant stones to make those amazing ripples out there, So totally. I think there's a couple other elements that I would say are a big part of it, which then are things like your story. Sharing your story, like I said, it's always another version of yourself, right? So if you have a story, and I know because I experienced this as a clinician, and it was before I did this. It was my very first podcast. It's my very first blog. I wrote my blog first and I thought, and then I just read my blog for my podcast. It's my story. But as clinicians, we're taught to be blank slates, right? We're taught to don't bring yourself to the therapy room, which I actually train my associates a little bit differently. But there is that aspect of you're putting too much effort, information out there. They're going to know about you. It was quite conflictual for me to put out, hey, I'm a law enforcement spouse. Because I'm no longer a blank slate. It's actually really amazing to me how people know nothing about me when they get to the therapy room. I'm like, really? Because you can Google me and find me everywhere. Cyndi Doyle, it'll come up. But putting our story out there, if you're going to go outside of the therapy room, people connect to story. Kate says this all the time, and I learned this from her. She said, people want you. They want more pieces of you. They don't want just your information. And that was something that I had to learn, is that connecting my story connects them to me. That makes me, and it's, once again, it's not a marketing thing. It's not like my spiel, whatever it is, right? It's not a gimmick. It's the fact that you show up differently outside of the therapy room than you do inside the therapy room. And it takes courage to do that, because you're putting yourself out there. Yeah, I think another aspect that everybody's probably familiar with is mindset, imposter syndrome, comparisonitis, like all of these aspects that just mess with our head. And that, like, I have a whole other model for like, how do we get through that? But the mindset is a huge one, and being willing to, I mean, everybody says now, like, do it scared. I say fear is my love language. Like, if I feel scared about it, then it's something that's meaningful, because my body's like, no, that's scary. Don't do it. So I'm like, great, let's go do that thing.
That I must
go do that thing. My fear didn't necessarily go away. I just have learned to live with it and have meaning behind it. I was working on something on Monday, and it was something I was uncomfortable with. And I could just feel my head like vibrating, like, no, back away, don't do this. Right. But I'm just like, no, sit in it, do the thing. It's that wise mind, this we talk about, like that wise mind. And that wise mind is like, no, I need to sit here. But, that amygdala is like, run. So well, that's not comfortable.
I've got to tell the story, though. You told me about you're the reason Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses exists, because I just thought it was just a bunch of people who liked asking me questions, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And, I thought I just, and you were this voice, that you were my safe space. And you were able to help me kind of work through what this could look like, and for you to be my community, and then for me to create a community. And it's just people who can, I don't know, do scary things. I mean, that's what it's kind of become. It's just this place where we can do scary things, and then come back to the community and say, okay, tell me, can I course correct this? Look at this, take a look at this. And right. I mean, because that's what you've been for me. And I'm so grateful for the Texas Counselors Creating Badass Businesses, because I think it has been this safe space. But that's huge, to be able to do it scared, right? And live in the discomfort.
Yeah. And I think you and I have a mutual admiration society.
I think so too. It's true.
I love that. But that's the whole point of the group, is the idea of like being able to reflect towards each other. Right. So if somebody sees somebody else and it's like, wow, this is amazing. And it's like that reflection, because all I did was reflect the way I saw you on the outside. And I'm like, Kate, everybody thinks you're a badass. And you're like, huh, okay. And so like motivating. But so one of my other elements here is network. Like we have to have a network, and clinicians are notorious for staying in their little therapy room and going home, right? We don't talk to anybody throughout the day unless you work for a group practice. But even then it's small. I think we've been changing as a community, especially during the pandemic. I think it forced us to reach out and to figure out what was going on with each other. But you've got to have a network of, like, if we're talking about your niche, you've got to build outside of that community, right? We got to, it'd be easy for me to stay in like a mental health law enforcement community, but I reached out to the girl who was the biggest blogger for law enforcement spouses. And I didn't do that strategically. I wanted her on my podcast because I'm like, oh, can I do the thing? We've become like, she's one of my best friends now. And we partner together. We have a course together. She lifts me up. I lift her up. It's a no scarcity kind of situation. No scarcity exists within our community. There are people that I've tried to reach out to, and they're like, no, I've been copied. And contrary to popular belief, people copying your content is not flattery. It is BS and painful. So there's that. And so, but getting outside, finding the network, finding tangential aspects of networks. So, it might be people that provide products to your community. What other consumptions does your niche have, or do they need? Right. So though network one, network two is like your community of some kind. Like you've got to have a squad. So I feel like I've talked a lot, so I'm going to pause.
Well, you're my squad. So there. So the workshops that we have coming up, Cyndi's going to appear again, if you're watching the replay, thank you. But you may have missed it. I'll post the link for the workshop in the thread. And we're going to dive deeper into these things. We're not going to go like 5 hours, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into sort of the nuts and bolts of this. And you've talked about the why, you've talked about the how, you've talked about sort of doing it while you're scared. What else, just kind of some parting words would you say to folks who are still, or who are maybe pushing past pre-contemplation and they're like, okay, I'm going to do the thing. Where should they start? Like, okay, should they set aside, let's take 2 weeks and go to the Mojave Desert and just write in, some kind of Jackson Pollock, all like Brene Brown says, or like you talked about, well, don't do the thing until somebody wants the thing. All right. So what are some kind of final words you would give someone as they're commencing to whatever?
I think the most important place to start is writing out your story and why this is so important to you. What happens if you don't do this? What's your motivation? Because in there, you're going to find your messaging. In there, you're going to find your purpose. And that is going to be core and central to everything that you're going to have to push through. And so I would say take some time to just do a little writing project. It doesn't have to be, a novel or 10 pages, but why is this important to you? What's your motivation for doing it? What's your story or your connection to this? What happens if what you have doesn't get out there?
That's cool. That's a neat statement. What happens if you don't do it?
Yeah. It's one of my, for me, it's that's my push. That's my push, is that I have to push past my comfort zone. So I think about like, well, what happens if I don't do this? Who do I miss out on impacting? Because one of the mindset issues is it's like, oh, this feels like it's all about me, right? Because I'm talking in a podcast to myself. But it's not about me. And I would say that people in your audience wanting to, if you're wanting to build out your niche, it's not about like, oh, I want to be seen. Many times that's not what it is. It's that I have a message to share. I want to impact. And so what happens if you don't share it?
I think that's the crux of it. It's what if you don't? And you're going to get better. You're going to get better at it. I mean, that's at first you're going to suck a little, right? You told me to go back to the Wayback Machine this morning. We were having another conversation and you're like, in your polo, you're like, have you ever heard of this? And I'm like, yeah, I think I went back and looked at my first website and I'm just like, so
I've done that before too.
And I've taken off all like my early videos and all my early blogs are on like draft, stuff to draft, right? Because it's just like cringy, but that's just part of the process. You're going to suck at
it's
first.
Your journey, right? Yeah. It's your journey. I mean, and this is like, I can tell you so many different parts of my journey that like my business partner and I had a YouTube channel called Forgetting Freud, and you could go back and look at those and you will laugh your butt off. Kate's writing that down right now.
Write it down.
They're still there and I'm going to leave them there. And it was kind of crazy. Like, cause during the pandemic, our grief videos went through the roof.
Wow.
Even though we did those in like 2016. It's crazy.
That is so cool. And so they have legs, don't they?
Yeah. We have to be willing to do this imperfectly. And unfortunately, as clinicians, like, what are we trained to do? You have to be perfect because there will be an ethical complaint, right? Somebody's going to come get you. You better not get this wrong. And so it's not intuitive to be like, well, it's good enough. Oh, well.
Fish. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So,
Well, and that's what we're here for. Also, I want to kind of throw that out too. If you're watching the replay, part of this is Cyndi and I are very committed to being that tribe. We want to be that tribe for you. And I really appreciate Cyndi for coming on and talking to me today. And so if you're in the Step It Up group, you will see a transcript of this. For those of you who don't like to watch videos, that's fine. Or you like to read along, that's cool too. And this will also appear on a blog and probably in my YouTube channel. So Cyndi, I'm going to hit stop. Hang on. Thank you guys for joining us. Cyndi, thank you.
yeah.